Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we're doing what we absolutely do best, tearing apart the complex, totally buried mechanics of a massive financial event. We are looking at the SpaceX IPO. Honestly, I'm incredibly excited to break down the actual paperwork for you today because the SpaceX prospectus, it's literally the ultimate case study and how things are rarely what they seem on your trading screen.
So let's just dive right into it. If you've been watching the financial news, you definitely saw everyone cheering as the SpaceX stock popped on day one. But you know that pop everyone is celebrating? It's not a celebration, it's a countdown. What they aren't telling you on TV is that the bankers designed a highly specific lockup agreement where higher prices actually trigger early insider selling. Basically, the higher the stock goes, the faster their engineered countdown ticks to zero.
All right, moving right into Section 1, the valuation disconnect.
Now, let's be totally fair up front. SpaceX is an extraordinary business. I mean, they're launching more rockets than entire nations. But we really have to separate a great company from a deal structure that's built for insiders. To understand why, you just need to anchor yourself to this staggering number, $1.75 trillion. Trillion with a T. That is the IPO valuation. When you compare that to their roughly $18.7 billion in revenue from last year, you're paying $94 in valuation for every single dollar of sales. 94 to 1. For a company that is currently losing money. It's just an incredibly stretched premium right out of the gate.
Just think about this contrast. You have the massive IPO valuation of $1.75 trillion, and then you have a $780 billion valuation calculated by a highly respected, completely independent Wall Street research firm. That is literally less than half. When you buy in at the IPO price, you're paying a premium that basically assumes every single step forward for the next decade is totally flawless. And if anything goes wrong, well, the deal structure is explicitly designed to protect the insiders at your expense.
Which brings us to Section 2, the staggered unlock schedule.
Okay, this is where we get into the actual plumbing of the deal. The supply of shares is mechanically engineered from day one, and understanding how this supply floods the market is absolutely key to understanding your risk. When this IPO opened, only a tiny sliver, about 5% of the company was actually trading. That's the retail float, right? The shares you and I can buy. That other massive 95% slice represents the founders, employees, and venture firms who aren't allowed to sell yet.
And they're held back by what's called a lockup period. Basically, it's a standard contractual time frame, usually about 180 days, that prevents insiders from just dumping all their shares and crashing the price instantly. A 180-day cliff is the standard framework for almost every big IPO we've seen, from Rivian to Uber. But here's where it gets super fascinating. SpaceX completely threw out the standard playbook.
Instead, they quietly built in a performance trigger. Look closely at the math buried in the prospectus. The IPO price is $135. If the stock trades just 30% above that, which is $175.50, for 5 out of 10 consecutive trading days before the first earnings report, boom, an extra 10% of insider shares unlocks immediately. Now think about the futures price. The market was already pricing the stock at $155. That trigger is barely 13% above expected trading. Literally, one single good week trips the wire. So what does this actually mean in reality? It means the pop is a starting gun. That massive day one price surge that retail investors are celebrating on their phones, it's actually the exact mechanism designed to unlock insider shares faster. The harder retail pushes the stock up, the faster insiders get their hands untied so they can sell those shares right back to them. It's wild. It's essentially retail investors unwittingly throwing a massive party for their own dilution.
Let's see how this builds into an actual timeline. Just picture a calendar pinned to your wall. Instead of waiting the standard 180 days, insiders have this incredibly staggered exit calendar. On day 70, which is August 21st, 7% unlocks. Then day 90, September 10th, another 7%. Day 105, 120, 135, each releasing another 7%. That is 35% of insider shares released across 5 separate tranches in a matter of weeks.
And it doesn't even stop there. If you break down the cumulative unlocks before we even reach that normal 180-day mark, it's staggering. You've got the 35% from the staggered slices we just talked about. But then, there are 2 hidden cliffs tied to the Q2 and Q3 earnings reports, making up another massive 48%. Add all that up, and an insane 83% of insider shares unlock before the calendar even hits day 180. Only that tiny 17% slice is left for the standard expiration.
So, Section 3. Why the setup is deliberate.
The natural question here is why. Why build this complex maze of triggers instead of just using a standard 180-day cliff? Well, the answer is that this schedule was meticulously engineered for three very specific goals. First, avoid a massive visible lockup drop. Second, accelerate the public float for NASDAQ inclusion. And third, provide predictable rolling exit windows for insiders. None of this is a secret, by the way. It's just intentionally buried deep within 150 pages of dense legal language that most retail buyers use to help them fall asleep.
Let's look a little closer at that second goal because the engineering here is honestly brilliant. Under a newly rewritten rule, companies can be added to the NASDAQ 100 in just 15 days. And here is the hidden index multiplier. If a company's free float, meaning the shares actually available to the public to trade, is under 20%, the index treats it as if it were 3 times larger. So SpaceX's tiny 5% float gets weighted as 15%. This forces over $600 billion in passive index funds to indiscriminately buy the stock. Every insider unlock automatically triggers forced institutional buying to perfectly absorb their exit. It's kind of genius, right?
Okay, moving on to Section 4, the history of lockup drops.
I know we're talking about a lot of perspective theory right now, but this has all happened before in hard, historical reality. Just look at the post-lockup reality checks for other incredibly hyped IPOs. When Palantir's lockup expired, insiders sold tens of millions of shares into retail demand, and the stock fell 13% in a single session. Rivian? Down 20% in one day. Uber hit an all-time low exactly on its expiration date. Even Snowflake, which used a staggered schedule a lot like SpaceX's, was dragged down 11%. The historical pattern is just crystal clear here. The higher the speculative premium you pay at the IPO, the more brutal the expiration date drop tends to be for the everyday retail investor.
And that brings us to Section 5, the Musk lockup illusion.
This is where we uncover the absolute biggest twist in the entire prospectus. I guarantee you the headlines will proudly declare that Elon Musk committed to a 366-day lockup. He cannot sell a single share for a full year, and on its face, that signals immense confidence. But notice the stark reality here. While the founder is locked up, 83% of the other insider shares unlock well before 180 days. Musk's lockup acts as a brilliant PR shield. It grabs all the positive headlines and shows loyalty, while quietly allowing early employees and venture firms to use multiple exit doors to cash out against your retail demand over the next 6 months. It's essentially two completely different deals, depending entirely on which side of the lockup you're on.
Let's pivot to our final part, Section 6, the 6-month strategy. So, what should you actually do with all this structural information if you genuinely believe in SpaceX long-term? Because hey, understanding ruthless mechanics doesn't mean you can never own the stock. It just changes how you play the game. The smartest path forward is the quiet calendar strategy. It costs absolutely nothing but patience. Just let the 6-month calendar do the work for you. Wait for those staggered tranches in August, September, and October to pass. Watch the actual earnings reports land so you have hard data. If you wait until day 180, all that early hype is completely replaced by real price discovery. You want to base your decisions on reality, not some engineered insider countdown clock.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. The ticker on your screen is loud, but the calendar is quiet. The number on the screen fades in a day, but the calendar runs for a year. Which one will you let make your decision? The best companies of the last few decades did not require you to buy them on day one to do extraordinarily well. Reading the deal mechanics before you ever read the deal headlines is your ultimate edge in investing. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay patient, and I'll see you next time.